Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 796 for the 7th of January, 2024. 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. And it's possible you'll hear a slight difference in this week's show because I've rearranged the Skeptic Zone Studios. A new recording corner, say that 6 times quickly, in the corner of my Skeptic Zone Studios. And I'm experimenting with different sound absorbing foam on the walls and a bit of carpet on the desk and all sorts of things. So it's a work in progress. But I hope it works out well, and I hope it sounds okay. Coming up on this week's show, a blast from the past for many Australians. We visit the Don Lane Show. And who was Don Lane? According to Wikipedia, Don Lane, born Morton Donald Isaacson in 1933, was an American-born talk show host and singer, best known for his television career in Australia, especially for hosting Tonight with Don Lane and The Don Lane Show. Now we're talking about the era from 1975 to 1983. And this show was huge. This was a talk show normally on Mondays and Thursday nights. It was more than a talk show. It was a variety entertainment interview type show. But why it's of interest to skeptics is because Don would, pretty regularly, semi-regularly at least, have various psychics and paranormal and whatnot coming on his show. Doris Stokes, the British clairvoyant, comes to mind. Uri Geller was on his show. All sorts of people like that. We're going to revisit some of those times in the history of the Don Lane Show. I'm sure this will bring back a lot of memories for my Australian listeners. Following that, it's part 2 of Maynard's interview with Susan Gerbic from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. And this week, Maynard and Susan talk about updating wiki pages and what pages should be or need to be updated on Wikipedia. Then, to round off the show in the Trove segment, looking back at digitised Australian newspapers and magazines, we look at mostly magazines this week, I think, specifically the Australian Women's Weekly, and the mentions of the Don Lane Show and psychics and so forth in the history of Australian media publications. It turns out Don Lane had a psychic dog. Now, in some very good news, I think we mentioned last week that Brian Dunning's movie, the UFO movie They, whoever they are, don't want you to see, was released onto YouTube, about a week ago. Probably just under a week ago or about a week ago. And as I look now, as I record this just before the show is published, the views are 124,096. That's great. So many people looking at that. And it's had almost 1,000 comments, which are very interesting to read. And I've noticed some people on TikTok trying to criticize the movie. UFO believers, of course, criticizing the movie. Although the funny thing is, one TikToker is criticizing it, saying it's all wrong and Brian doesn't have his facts right, but you should watch it anyway. If you haven't seen the movie, you can go to theufo.movie, or if you go to skepticzone.tv, look on the right-hand side near the picture of Michelle Bickersma, who, as you will remember, did that wonderful series of logical fallacies, which you can click on Michelle and listen to those. But near Michelle's picture, you'll find the link for the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. And I suggest you see it before they do something about it. Congratulations, Brian Dunning. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. I'm going to run downstairs and have a early morning coffee. Why not? And while I do that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. When I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to watch much late-night television, but occasionally I would sneak into the lounge room and see a show called The Don Lane Show. The Don Lane Show was a chat show, a talk show, which ran from 1975 to 1983, and it was huge in Australia. In fact, these days it's hard to really convey how big the Don Lane Show was and how big a star Don Lane was himself. Don Lane, originally from the United States, came to Australia and landed a career as a singer, cabaret entertainer, and eventually on television as a TV host. For most of its run, the show was broadcast on Mondays and Thursday nights, and anybody who was anybody in the world of entertainment would appear on the Don Lane Show, including the big names from overseas. If they were promoting a movie or a new record or whatever they were doing, they would end up on the Don Lane Show. Typically the show ran for an hour and a half, but it would always run over time because Don had a competition, Don's Wheel, at the end of the show, and he was more or less given a bit of free rein to let that segment run over if it was fun and entertaining, and people would win cars and furniture and things like that. Also remember, in those years, 75 to 83, the choice of viewing in Australia on television was limited. There was only about 3 or 4 or 5 networks in total. So a big act, a big show on the 9 network would simply scoop the ratings because there wasn't much competition anyway. Now, skeptics might know the name Don Lane because he was the man who threw James Randi off his show. Don Lane was a big promoter of paranormal, supernatural, otherworldly, that sort of thing, and he would often have so-called psychics and whatnot on his show, including Doris Stokes, who became very popular. And I think we'll cover Doris Stokes in a future episode. She was a British medium, so-called medium, who died many years ago, but she received a lot of publicity, a lot of fame by appearing on the Don Lane Show. And an interesting thing I discovered, because various Don Lane shows are now available on YouTube, not many as a percentage because there were hundreds of them, but a few. And I came across the best of the Don Lane Show, which was broadcast some years later, sort of a roundup of the highlights of the show as a whole, where one of the guests was none other than Uri Geller. And what's telling about the clip that they show is Geller is doing the compass trick, where he pretends to move a compass using mental energy. And even Don Lane, in the retrospective, when he was presenting the retrospective, points out the trick Geller uses to move the compass via a small magnet. Now, one of the guests Don Lane would have on regularly was a presenter by the name of Kevin Arnett, who, I have his book here, one of his books, Mysteries, Myths or Marvels, Kevin Arnett. Have you ever wondered about such things as UFOs, the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle, the strange power of pyramids, and how psychic healing works? What are these powerful and disturbing psychic phenomena and unexpected forces which baffle even the finest scientific minds of our time? In this illuminating and thought-provoking book, Kevin Arnett probes the mysteries of other dimensions. It is a searching appraisal which investigates such enigmas as time warps, the power of prediction, auras, biofeedback, telepathy, and other manifestations of powers that present-day analysts cannot, in bold, cannot explain away. Recommended price in Australia, $2.50. Now, this is a paperback, and dear listener, just by me reading out the list of items here on the back cover, Bermuda Triangle, pyramids and so on, you could probably surmise when this book was written. Oh, it's autographed. Now, I found this in a second-hand bookshop many years ago, and I discovered it was actually autographed by Kevin Arnett himself. First published in Australia by Sphere Books, Limited, 1977. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So let me bring you to the year 1981. And this is a couple of days, the show was broadcast a couple of days before the 1981 Melbourne Cup, which is Australia's premier horse race. And every year there are people making predictions and betting huge sums on the Melbourne Cup. It's sort of like the Kentucky Derby. It's the one horse race that they say it stops the nation. Well, many people pay attention. Typically businesses will have parties for the Melbourne Cup, and it's just a big social opportunity. So we bring you to the 2nd of November 1981 on the Don Lane Show, where Kevin Arnett had collected a panel of psychics and a computer technician who was using an Apple computer, which was relatively new at the time. On the panel of psychics, for lack of a better word, we had Kerry Calkins, who was a very popular, well-known psychic of that era in Melbourne, Anita Brown, who said she read teacups, Jeff Willis, who was posing as a clairvoyant, and maybe we'll talk about Jeff Willis more on another occasion. I actually know Jeff Willis. He's a lovely fellow who does lots of entertainment work. Somebody called Kay McLennan, who was a palm reader. Also on the telephone line from England was Doris Stokes. Now, I will say that the show was typically light-hearted, typically entertaining. So Don Lane and his sidekick Bert Newton, a very famous Australian who sadly passed away a few years back, a very famous TV presenter, were having a bit of fun with the segment, I think. And of course, the whole idea of the segment was, can you use psychic powers to predict the winner of the horse race? And the audience that Don Lane appealed to, by and large, would like to see stories about paranormal, psychics, clairvoyance, mysteries, Bermuda Triangle, that sort of stuff. Here is how the segment was introduced all those years ago.
Thank you very much on behalf of all of them. Thank you. This is the time of year when the whole country stops for a horse race, the Melbourne Cup. Now that's unique in itself, and tonight, with the help of Kevin Arnett, we're taking a unique approach to predicting the winner. I don't think any of you have ever seen all of this come together at once. Welcome, Kevin Arnett. Will you hear? Okay.
We are going to have some fun.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope that out of all of this, we at least get somebody a winner. You know?
Well, look, like you, I've never ever backed the winner of the Melbourne Cup. I can never ever choose the horse. And a few weeks ago, I woke up in the morning and thought, now what can we do on the Don Lane Show on Cup Eve? I thought, why not have a psychic panel and see if one of the psychics can pick the Melbourne Cup, or maybe they'll all pick the same horse, which could be the winner.
Well, when you say psychics, what do you mean? Or what?
Well, people like astrologers, a tea leaf reader. I thought we'd bring in a clairvoyant, someone who does tarot cards. Why not bring up someone like Doris Stokes, whom we all know has been pretty accurate with a lot of things. I mean, this is fantastic.
Who is Doris going to get in touch with, do you think, to find out the results?
When you ring her up in a minute, I would ask about Far Lap.
No, she's not going to be.
I heard a little whinny from the other side.
Did you?
Yes, but
the spirit side, I heard her whinny, right?
Yeah, through the nose, but I'm only chaffing. But seriously, Mike McCall-Jones wrote the line.
Yes, I thought so.
Yeah, and if that's not all enough, if all the psychics are not enough for you tonight, we're going to have one final bit of icing on the cake. We're going to have a computer technician with one of the latest Apple computers. He's got all the form of all the horses, their ages, their weight, all the things that they've won and so on, what they haven't won. He's going to press the buttons, and that will come hopefully number one as well. So we're going to do that in just a moment.
And we're going to meet all these people when we come back, is that right?
That's for sure.
Okay, well, we'll meet the whole bunch of them. Psychics, computer experts, Doris Stokes, the whole lot, and maybe a Melbourne Cup winner. Okay, we'll be back with Kevin and Bert and a whole lot of fun. Hello, Lucky Baby Boy. I I just want you to know, if you people are convincing enough tonight, even Bert may change his bet. You never know. Okay, where will we start?
Well, look, how about starting with Kerry?
Okay, Kerry.
Well, looking from an astrologer's point of view, it doesn't look like it's going to be a particularly good day for favourites.
Well, how do you know that?
Well, it's just a couple of planets up there that are going to get in the way of not long shots, but heavyweights and favourites coming up. It'll be more a day for taking a place bet than going for a favourite. I find it very hard to distinguish between two horses if I was taking a bet, Hyperno and Kiro Trelay. But I think I would actually have to go for Kiro Trelay.
It's not outside of those.
No.
Second fave.
But is it?
Yeah, about second, third fave.
Oh, well, you just talked me out of it then, Bert.
I think it is, Kevin. You've got some prices there. Yes, it would be a second, third.
Kiro Trelay is neither two. It's second. Yeah, the
But
second.
I'd have to go for Hyperno.
You're going to say
Yeah, that's because I couldn't spell Kiro Trelay.
Hyperno.
Hyperno.
All right,
But
then.
my cat's very keen on magistrate.
Your what?
Cat.
Your cat?
I haven't got room to write that, I'm sorry, Kevin.
This is Anita Brown.
Anita Brown. Anita, now, how long do you have to read the tea leaves before you get something out of that?
Well, I've been looking at it already a little while, so I have a bit of an idea. It definitely looks like number 3.
Number 3.
Our Paddy Boy.
Right, yep.
So it means that Kevin should be betting on number 3.
I should. I put 50 cents,
This
50
is your
cents each way.
teacup, isn't it?
It is my drink for tea.
Yeah.
Why does it look
Right.
like number 3 in it? Do you get the image 3, or do you
Well,
get...
it just looks to me like number 3.
Right.
Okay, we'll
And
go
you're
with
used to reading tea leaves, so you would interpret them better than anybody, I suppose.
Well, this is many people see completely different things that I do.
What's our
but,
Paddy Boy going for?
Oh, it's 14 to 1, it's blown.
10 to 1. Is
No,
that
it's
Paddy?
14 to 1 now, Kevin.
Oh, is it 14 to
You can
1
get
now,
14
is
to
it?
1, yeah.
14 to 1, okay.
Well, maybe I'll have
that's-
a little bet on that. Oh, I don't have any money left.
You're
Goes on
going
my way.
to end up betting on everything.
Now, Jeff Willis is a clairvoyant. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, Farlap definitely won't win because he's stuffed.
Now you've got lunacy. We're feeling a little tired ourselves, but we're still doing the program, aren't we?
No, I go for Kingston Town.
Well, why do you go...
Well, all right, it's very simple actually. 4 weeks ago, I had a vision that Kingston Town would win, and I'm sticking with that.
Where do you get these visions?
Well, well, sometimes in the bath, you know.
Sometimes
Sometimes in the bath.
in the bath. Is this literally in the bath or the bathroom? In the bath.
Well, it depends where. Look, I can get a vision anywhere at any time.
Well, so can I, but I mean, we're talking about horse racing. Now, listen, with the cards, how do you know, without it getting too complicated, there's 22 cards there, you say?
Yes.
Right? How do you know which ones to pick out for what? I mean, how do you know which one's going to do well?
Well, I designate each card to the horse. So the
You
horse-
designate the card
Yes,
to the horse.
So that
1 through 22, is that what you're
Yes,
saying? Well,
yes.
how do you know which card is 1? Do they go in a certain
Well,
order?
I memorise the cards. I know the cards.
Right. I
Okay.
still don't understand, but I'll say right. I look very intelligent then. That's good. Okay, you tell us.
I have, between two horses in particular, Hyperno and the New Zealand horse, the grey. The one you can't spell and I can't say.
Kiro
Yes, yes, Kiro Trelay. Yes. My long shot would be 19.
19. Who's
Number 19 is
Flashing Light.
That's the
Flashing
one I
light.
went for. Yeah,
Flashing light.
yeah, right.
Flashing
As an
Light is your long
outsider.
shot.
Yes.
So what's your first one again?
I would say flashing light.
First one. Okay,
Yeah.
Bert. Flashing light.
Flashing Light. Well, there's a long shot for you. Flashing
Yeah.
Light. Okay, now we got Doris Stokes. Do we on the line?
Yes, if you pick up the phone, I don't think you find
Which
Doris
one?
is
This
there
one here?
already.
This the one? Patty Boy and El Lorena. Yeah?
Yes, but the one I go for most is Flashing Light because I think the jockey's name is Cooper.
And what has that got to do with anything?
Well, I picked up the jockey's name first.
You mean you heard the name Cooper before you heard anything else?
Yes, I usually I don't bet, but if I do ever do, I look for the jockey.
Right.
The jockey's name first, Cooper.
Okay, Doris. Thank you very, very much. And we'll put down Flashing Light on the board for you. And thanks for taking the time and participating with us, Doris.
Well, may I just say love to everyone?
So, Ralph, we'd like you to do a little reading for us, in your way, of course, with technology, and see what you come up with.
Now, Ralph, what's been fed into this machine?
We've fed all the data on all the horses that are running in the race, and with a little bit of luck, we'll have the winner for you.
Okay, well, punch it up. Let's see what we come up with.
And we got third place. Second place.
Kingston
Ah, that's an interesting one.
Look at this.
Look at this.
No
pier. How about that?
No pier.
All right then, there we go with no pier.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we helped you or not. We've come up with what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 horses.
So Kerry Calkins predicted Hyperno. Anita Brown with her teacup, her tea leaf reading, predicted Our Paddy Boy. Jeff Willis predicted Kingston Town. Kay McLennan with her tarot cards predicting a horse called Flashing Light. And Doris Stokes via the phone from the UK predicted Flashing Light. So the segment lasted no more than 15 minutes, had lots of laughs, lots of mysteries. The Apple computer, by the way, predicted a horse called No Pier. Now, the Melbourne Cup was run the very next day. It's always the first Tuesday in November. And the official placings that year: number 1, Just a Dash. Number 2, El Loreno. And number 3, Flashing Light. Now, what you didn't hear in the clips I've been playing are all the other horses mentioned by the various so-called psychics. So you can add another 4 or 5 horses on top of that. So nobody predicted the winner of the Melbourne Cup. And even if they had, thousands of people randomly pick the winner of the Melbourne Cup each year. But again, I think the segment was put together because it was fun, mysterious, interesting. It involved the Melbourne Cup. It involved the audience thinking they had a possibility of an inside look into the future from which they could financially gain if psychics are real, and so on. Now I'm going to add a link to the full segment on YouTube in this week's show notes, as well as the segment with Uri Geller, where if you look carefully you can see him transfer, well, what should I say? If you look carefully, you can see what he appears to be doing, which he appears to be transferring a magnet which would be secreted up near his hairline from his right hand into his left hand, and finally bringing that close to move the compass. Now, Don Lane died many years ago in 2009, but a few years before he died, I was visiting the local club down the end of the street, where many years ago we used to record the think tank segments for the Skeptic Zone. And I don't remember the occasion. It could have been a Melbourne Cup afternoon. And there was Don. And he walked around the entire auditorium, greeting everybody, saying hello, shaking their hand. And of course, he made his way to where I was, and I shook his hand because he was a great entertainer. And he noticed the lapel pin I was wearing, which was the flying pig, the Pegasus from the James Randi Educational Foundation. And he said, "Oh, hi, what's that?" And I told him, and he really got a chuckle out of it. He really appreciated seeing that, I think. But getting back to Kevin Arnett, I can find scant information about him online. The odd newspaper clipping of the time. He was on radio as well. He was a TV weatherman for a while. But apart from that, there's just not very much information available. But he did leave a book for me to read, all about auras and reincarnation.
Welcome, everyone.
Step right up. We're going to heal you. We are the healers, Ross and Carrie.
Yes, yes. You there. You look like you're upset. Come up here.
Yes, you are healed because you've listened to our podcast.
Yes.
Have you been having trouble with demons?
Are you sleeping too much, too little, just right?
We have the solution. It is to listen to
Oh No, Ross and Carrie. A show where we examine unusual claims.
We show up so you don't have to. Find us on MaximumFun.org.
We won't actually heal you.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, Skeptic Zone listeners, we're here in the Skeptic Zone studio with that Susan Gerbic, of course, who is head of the Guerrilla Skeptics. Now, you say when you train the Guerrilla Skeptics that there's a list of possible pages they might like to work at or suggestions or something. What's one of the ones that you really hasn't been done quite yet that you go, I wish someone would get onto this one?
I have a long list of them. Oh, my gosh. I have. So when you go through my training, which takes about 4 months, and I hope that people reach out to me on Facebook with their Wikipedia username and come and edit for me. We badly need it so bad. And what they do is their final project, they have to go through a whole bunch of steps of learning how to edit Wikipedia. But the final step is they have to take a page that is in bad shape and they have to make it beautiful. And they have to use the steps that they go through. So it's not impossible or anything. You learn how to do this step by step by step. It leads up to it. All training does. I have a list right now with about 50 people, and I have a variety of different topics, you know, people in science, people who've done inventions, people of different places around the world, different languages, so that people can choose something hopefully that interests them. And that page grows all the time. There are just so many that need so much work. There's one page that I would like to have somebody rewrite. It's Barry Beierstein, and he's one of the Wikipedia pages that I wrote first years ago when I didn't really know what I was doing. He was an expert on graphology, you know, where you do the writing.
The science of writing and being able to tell a person's signature and that kind of thing.
Yeah, their personality, you know, from the handwriting. And that was a huge student science.
How much is that? How woo is that? How much is
it's very woo.
Oh, okay.
Very, 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 very woo. Very, very, very exponentially woo. But it was a big deal. People were making hiring decisions on people. They would say, oh, this person must be a sex offender based on their handwriting analysis. I mean, they were making all kinds of judgments on people. You can't marry that person because their handwriting analysis says that they're going to cheat on you, or I don't know. Anyway, so he did a lot of work on that, him and his brother.
I can make a birthday, if either cursive or freehand, I can make a birthday card look like a death threat, just by the way I write.
Have you had a lot of practice?
Happy birthday? What does he mean by that, the way he writes it? Yeah.
So anyway, it was a thing, and I believe it's still happening in some places that there are some people who make hiring decisions based on it. But then we are doing a lot more typing. We're not handwriting things as much anymore. But anyway, Barry Beierstein was somebody that I've known, when I barely got into the community back in 2002. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And his Wikipedia page, I wrote it when I wasn't paying any attention to, I didn't have any lessons. I didn't know what I was doing. And I really wish somebody would come back in and rewrite that page. But he's died. He died maybe 10 years ago, so a lot of people don't know who he is. But I wrote it, and I did a really awful job, and I'd love to have somebody come back in and rewrite that completely.
Susan Gerbic, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maynard.
The UFO movie They Don't Want You to See is now available on YouTube. This new feature-length independent documentary reveals the real science behind the popular UFO craze. In an age when misinformation, alternative facts, and conspiracy theories have become mainstream, UFOs have risen to become one of the most talked about pop culture phenomena. What is in our skies? What do we know, and how do we know it? And most importantly, are we being visited? Science does have most of these answers, and we're working on answering the rest of them. The film features experts in physics and relativity, exobiology, exoplanetary spectral analysis, image analysis, pilot training and air traffic control, and defense. To watch it now, visit the UFO.movie for links to all the streaming options. Rent to watch ad-free, or stream on YouTube to watch free with ads. The UFO.movie, now available.
Now it's time, once again, to go back to the archives at Trove, at trove.nla, which stands for National Library of Australia, .gov stands for government, .au stands for Australia. And earlier in the show, we were reminiscing about the Don Lane show. And I was saying what an impactful show it was, and it really was. And I've read subsequently that at one stage Don Lane was the highest paid entertainer in Australia. He certainly worked hard. And I have come across quite a few clippings, news reports here and there, magazine articles to do with Don Lane. Not surprisingly, there are many, and some focus on the paranormal side. But it does appear that Don Lane was a believer in all sorts of paranormal occurrences. And this is not surprising because, you know what, this is 40 years ago. And even today, there is a percentage of the population who simply accepts these things as real or don't know enough about them or haven't experienced the skeptical scientific outlook. It's part of society. So we first turn to the pages of the Australian Women's Weekly, or Women's Weekly, I should say, dated the 13th of October 1982. Don Lane and his shadow. And this is an interesting one because it's over 2 pages. And so when they were putting the magazine down on the scanner, the edge of the page is sort of wrapped around a little bit. So we'll just have to bear with it and see if we can get through this. According to Don Lane, not only is his pooch psychic, but there are popular Australian TV personalities who can perceive extraordinary things. And as you can imagine, this refers to popular entertainment and media people in Australia roughly 40 years ago. And we have a couple of pictures. One is the radio announcer John Laws, who is still a radio announcer, and the TV host Mike Walsh, who at the same time as the Don Lane show had a very popular daytime talk show. John Laws, above, and Mike Walsh, right, are 2 other television personalities that Don believes have an extra sense. Of course, John Laws also did TV specials and whatnot. Don Lane claims his much-loved 5-year-old German Shepherd dog Shadow is able to read his mind. I don't believe in ghosts or the occult, Don hurries to add. But there have been several inexplicable mysteries in my life, and Shadow is the latest, the top compere revealed. In a long and serious interview, Don Lane revealed that when he was aged 7, his cousin Arthur had seen the, quote, shimmering appearance, end quote, of their grandmother hours after she died. To this day, Don said, he shuns clairvoyants and spiritualists because they always maintain that they can see an apparition behind Don watching him. Don also swears that when he was living with Carmen Van Horen several years ago, he awakened one night because there was a, quote, presence, end quote, in their room. Explaining the mysteries in his life, Don said that he believed that other television personalities, including John Laws and Mike Walsh, had extra sense over other people because of their professions. Don has taught Shadow a range of obedience tests and playful tricks. During the years, the affectionate dog has guarded Don's home in Brighton. I have always communicated with him, he said. One particular game we play is this. I will throw a ball or a stick and warn him he can only run after the ball or stick when I call a certain number. A new twist, which I prefer not to call mental telepathy, has entered the game. I take Shadow onto the beach and whisper a secret number to a friend. I ask Shadow to concentrate on the number in my mind, which I do not say to him. I can call dozens of numbers, and he will not chase the ball until I yell the secret number in my mind. It's amazed many of my friends. And we can break in here quickly and possibly offer the explanation of the clever Hans effect. This is where the the horse was touted as having special powers to do mathematics and communicate, when it would appear that nonverbal cues were causing the horse to do things. And in this case, it's quite easy to imagine that Don was flinching or preparing or something when he gave the secret number. But we'll never know. Don said, "Without wishing to sound odd, I believe that an animal who is close to you can read your mind. And I believe that other people in the business with whom I have discussed these matters have an extra sense of communication, such as Mike Walsh, John Laws, and Bert Newton." Don went on, "I was 7 when my mother's mother died, and my parents went to the dear lady's wake. I was at the house with my cousin Arthur, 3 years older than I am. We were romping around the room, and I ran into the hallway, and I saw my grandmother standing at the top of the stairway. There was a shimmering light around her. She looked down and was smiling. I went and explained it to Arthur. He came out and saw my grandmother also. Maybe it was 20 years before I saw Arthur again at a family function in New York. At the very same moment, we both asked the other one if they remembered the sight we had seen. We know what we saw. It is not the," and here the next word is gone, unfortunately, "of two imaginations. I can't bear to be with clairvoyants, spiritualists, and people who claim they are in touch with the other side. The Carmen incident goes back to a time at the Hilton Hotel in Melbourne. I jumped from a dead sleep in a sweat and woke up on my hands and knees. I sincerely believe there was a third presence in that room." Lane also criticized harshly during our interview people who wanted to believe in mysteries which surrounded famous celebrities such as Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. Don Lane, 49 in November, has no thoughts of retiring from television. He said, "I think our show has been successful in 1982, and I think there have been some memorable moments. The Don Lane Show is now designed for people to sit back, put up their feet, and for them to see something of interest and to get some laughs. The same thing next year. We won't be going in for controversy or putting on pressure. I take no notice of the critics after almost 20 years of TV here. I like to think our viewers think that fakes won't stay around." Oh, by the way, there is a picture on the second page of Bert Newton, Don's sidekick, and Don himself, smiling away with his lovely dog Shadow, a big German shepherd. And the caption reads, "Above, Bert Newton, also gifted with extra sense in Don's opinion. Right, Don and his psychic German shepherd Shadow." And that story is credited to George Wilson, and it's a little bit ironic that that in the very next year, 1983, the show was axed. Now here's an article again from the Australian Women's Weekly dated the 16th of December 1981, and it relates directly to the horse panel, the horse psychic panel, the panel of psychic horses, the clairvoyance and whatnot you heard earlier in the show. And this seems to be a letter to the editor. And it says in a column called "You Said It," send your letters to Ian Rolfe, ROLPH, the Australian Women's Weekly, TV World, GPO Box 4178, Sydney, 2001. How about that? Anyway, this correspondent, who is B. Chenoweth of Western Australia, writes, "Don Lane's psychic panel didn't fare too well in their feeble attempt to predict the Melbourne Cup winner. However, we can still believe in miracles because Don's pathetic excuse for a variety show actually survived the ratings again." Oh, a little unkind, I think. And once again from the Australian Women's Weekly, and we have the 28th of May 1980 in a 4-page spread called "What Lies Ahead for 15 Famous Australians, Amazing Predictions of Peter Herkos." And I will skip to the section on Don Lane. "He is on TV, and I see a national show, not a local show, and I see it going to other English-speaking countries. it's not that he is going, it's a tape of the show to Canada, England, and America. I see him on stage, a nicely set up stage on TV, and I see him being like Johnny Carson, the top talk show host in the US. And when the tape of his show goes to England, he will be offered another job there. It will sound like a better job, but he shouldn't take it because the tapes of his show will be a big success in England and he will be offered better things in Australia. He should be a comedian, but he will be more successful in England than in Canada or America. He has struggled in life, living from week to week and worrying about how to pay the bills, but he is a better businessman now. That is just... I need not tell you how weird that is. It doesn't make sense. It didn't happen. And thrown in a little bit of Barnum's statement. And it's interesting looking at this article, in fact, to see the very famous people from the year 1980. Might be worth a revisit to see how many of these predictions actually eventuated. Once again from the Australian Women's Weekly, this time dated the 30th of July, 1980. And it's not a letter to the editor, but it says, spooky bit on television on the Don Lane show recently when Kevin Arnett, a cult expert and authority on things that go bump in the night, was a guest. Arnett was talking about the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Pharaoh's curse. Suddenly, he went pale and said, "I feel strange, very faint." And the next thing, the link from Melbourne was lost. For 4 minutes, the Lane show was off air in Sydney, and then it resumed, with Arnett looking bewildered and Lane amazed. "It wasn't a put-up thing. It really happened," said Don Lane. "How can you explain it?" And, as it happens, I have the clip from that show.
At the moment he died, which was 2 a.m., at precisely that time in Cairo, all the lights failed all over Cairo and the electricity went out. And it came back unexpectedly a few minutes later. And to this day, there's been no explanation for what really happened on that occasion. Now, at the same time, as Lord Carnarvon died, his young fox terrier dog, back in England, raised itself up into its hind legs, gave one yelp and fell over dead. This is exactly the time that Lord Carnarvon died. And that set off an extreme set of circumstances.
I would say, yeah.
Now, Howard Carter, nothing happened to him, but I just don't feel well, Don. Do you mind? I'm sorry, seriously, I just don't feel well. I'm not kidding.
Are you serious or what?
Yes, I'm quite serious. I just don't
What's
feel
the
well.
matter?
I just don't feel well. I just feel very faint.
No,
I'm not kidding, honestly. I'm not kidding at all.
Now, as for the show, the link being lost between Sydney and Melbourne in those days, it sort of happened sometimes, but it's not out of the realms of possibility that somebody thought it would make an excellent publicity stunt, but we'll never know. Again, in the Australian Women's Weekly, this time dated the 2nd of December, 1981. A spirited Don Lane show. Don Lane is usually on the ball when it comes to looking into the future. This, no doubt, is because he surrounds himself with spiritualists, clairvoyants, astrologers, and even those who find the answers inside teacups. Take the night before the Melbourne Cup, when Lane had no less than 4 seers in the studio, as well as Doris Stokes, as a happy medium, on the line from London. All this was part of an endeavour to pick the winner of the Cup, and with all those present, someone, I guess, had to strike it lucky. Mrs. Stokes had a flash of insight and went for flashing light. She was wrong, but then it's just possible that being so far from Flemington, that's where the race is held, she got confused with the flashing light on the starting barrier. Oddly, though, no one ventured a forecast on Lane. Is he on a winner for 1982? Will he, for instance, start his show next year with an original joke for once? Ooh, that's mean. Will Bert make a takeover bid and turn the program into the Bert Newton Show featuring Don Lane on the wheel. Will Don manage to sing a complete song in tune? Oh, this is cruel. All fascinating questions and not a single answer forthcoming before the show was over. Perhaps Doris Stokes, the great spiritualist, does know something but won't let on. With ratings up in Melbourne, down in Sydney, could 1982 be the year the Don Lane Show gives up the ghost? And finally, to wrap this up, and it relates more to Doris Stokes than Don Lane, however, and this is from the Canberra Times, dated the 12th of May, 1987. In brief, Doris Stokes dies age 76. London, Monday, Associated Press. Doris Stokes, 76, who attracted large audiences for her demonstrations of clairvoyance, died on Saturday in Wellington Hospital, her family said today. She had been receiving treatment for a cancerous brain tumour. Stokes claimed to be able to pass on messages from the dead and was widely popular in Britain, where she could pack theatres, even selling out the 2,325-seat London Palladium. She appeared on television in the United States and Australia. And I think Doris Stokes is somebody we can look more closely at in a future episode. Well, there you are. A look into some of the newspaper clippings and news reports and so on, letters to the editor, more or less regarding the late Don Lane. And of course, he had his critics, but I will say that he did a fine job as hosting an entertaining show. It was entertaining for the time. And as I said earlier in the show, the Don Lane Show was the point of contact for many major celebrities from around the world when they were visiting Australia or needed to promote something in Australia. I'm sure many of my Australian listeners will remember the show fondly. But you too can remember all sorts of things fondly, or maybe not so fondly, when you go to Trove at trove.nla. I tell you what, there's also an option there. You can sign up to Trove, you can join up, subscribe more or less, and you can volunteer your time to help transcribe, because one of the wonderful things about Trove is you can see the original scan from the newspaper or the magazine, and that's what I normally read from. But on the left of the screen, you can see the transcript in plain text. And I think that's often automatically generated, but there are many times where you need a human to look at the page and interpret the letters, which can be a little bit blurry or obscure. This is something that artificial intelligence can't do yet. So if you're of a mind, check it out. trove.nla.gov.au. I'm sure they would be grateful for your help. Because when you go to Trove to do some research, or indeed to offer your services to help translate some of the text, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to all those people who have been watching the movie They Don't Want You to See, the UFO movie. It's a terrific movie. It really is. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen on the subject. I say that even realizing that Brian is a good friend of mine. It's still, even though it's Brian Dunning, it's still a great documentary. So do me a favor. Do Brian a favor. If you enjoy the movie, please spread the link. Let your friends know. Let your enemies know. Let the person down the street know. On your socials, tweet about it, X about it. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? X. You can tweet about it, or Instagram it, or TikTok it, or it would really help. It's a movie that champions scientific investigation. Now, a quick announcement from me. For those of you in the Berkeley, California area, I will be giving a talk at the Berkeley Public Library on the 10th of February. And this talk will be The Secrets Behind a Skeptical Podcast. Richard Saunders, host of the Skeptic Zone podcast for 17 years. 17 years? Good grief. It takes you behind the scenes of how a typical podcast is created each week, from conducting interviews and gathering information to the actual recording and editing. This is a chance for you to be part of a live recording of this well-known podcast. Well-known podcast. Maybe Rob Palmer will sue me for copyright. Being the well-known skeptic, I don't know. Richard Saunders is the chief investigator for the Australian Skeptics and a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. There you go. I will be adding more information and links in the coming weeks. But if you're in the Berkeley area, if you're in the Bay Area, you might want to pencil in the 10th of February, and that talk is scheduled to be at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. Coming up on next week's show, I don't know. I can't look into the future. I can guess there'll be a Trove segment. We'll all have to tune in to find out. But for this week, for the beginning, the start... Oh, hello. Even the rainbow lorikeets out the window are here again. It's no surprise. For this week, for the start of 2024, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to all those people who listen after the music for the dice game. This is where, if you don't know, I roll a 10-sided die or a 6 or a 30 or a who knows what, and you use your predicting power such that it is. I've got my Skeptic Zone notepad here. It's actually just a pad of origami paper, so there you go. And I'm going to play along. I'm going to predict as well. I'm going to roll this D10. Very nice. It's red, translucent red with white numbers. I'm going to roll it 3 or 4 times, and we're all going to guess. In fact, I'm going to guess my numbers in advance. I'm going to guess 7, 5, 1, and 9. Let's see how I go. Let's see how you go. First number. 1. All right, so not off to a great start, but let's try the next one. Here it comes. 5. Hey, a match. There we go, Susan Gerbic. We're starting the year with a matching pair of 5s. Next number. Here it comes. What did you guess? The number is 7. Just before I continue, I guessed the first 3 numbers would be 751, and the first numbers are 157. Ooh, spooky. Last number. Here it comes. I guessed 9, and in fact it's come up 1. All right. So the winning numbers are 7, 5, 1, and 9. Happy New Year.